Hello everybody, welcome back to History Student Reacts. Today we'll be watching Hannibal, Part 4, Battle of the Trebia. So, last time we witnessed Hannibal coming face to face with Publius Scipio. They had their first big engagement of the Second Punic War, and it ended with Scipio retreating, a victory for the Carthaginians under Hannibal. This episode, we're going to see more conflict between the Romans and the Carthaginians. This is going to be an exciting one. Now, if you guys end up enjoying this video, I'd appreciate it if you would check out the Patreon, which is linked in the description, and through which you can get monthly exclusive reactions and full unedited reactions that can't be uploaded to the YouTube channel for copyright reasons. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's jump right into this reaction.
After the defeat at Ticinus, the Roman Senate looks to save face by blaming Gallic allies for being ineffective.
And this is a pretty common tactic when we're talking about big imperial powers. If they lose a battle, you want to look for somebody to blame. So, you don't want to blame your brave Roman soldiers or the well-regarded Publius Scipio. Who should you blame? What about your Gallic allies? They were ineffective. Now, to be fair, in terms of cavalry, sure, the Carthaginians were far better armed with their Numidian and Spanish cavalry, Iberian cavalry, than the Romans were with their Gallic cavalry, but you really cannot blame the Gauls for that loss, not in my opinion.
Taking comfort in the fact that Hannibal has yet to face the vaunted Roman infantry, long as his arrival to northern Italy restores confidence.
And you can see the Romans are a little cocky. Now, the Romans are always pretty cocky. This is a pretty long-standing facet of the Roman attitude towards the world. They're very confident in themselves and their own ability. And that's good, generally. But you can already see how in a situation like this, it might cause them to underestimate their enemy. Why did we lose? It was our Gallic allies. Hannibal hasn't fought against a true Roman army. Now that Longus is there, he doesn't stand a chance. Hannibal's done for. Okay, well, we'll see how this goes.
Hannibal now faces armies of both Roman consuls.
Yeah, this is true. Hannibal's facing two different Roman armies now. That is a tough position to be in.
It's early December 218 BC. Publius Scipio's life still hangs in the balance due to wounds he sustained at Ticinus.
Interesting little sound effect there.
But, ironically, his troubles are only just starting.
But I didn't know he was in such dire condition at this point.
His defeat at Ticinus has major consequences for Rome. It directly caused the garrison...
I will say also, I got confused with this last time. We have Ticinum, which I think is the town, and Ticinus, which is the river. And I've heard the battle called the Battle of Ticinum and the Battle of Ticinus, which gets a little tricky.
...garrison at Clastidium to surrender the town's massive grain depot.
Right.
This strips his army of food reserves and disrupts his supply lines, making any advance into enemy territory a risky venture. At the same time, Hannibal finally replenishes his own reserves, which were dwindling ever since he descended from the Alps.
Exactly. Remember the position that Hannibal is in. He is far from Iberia, his base of operations. He has crossed over the Alps, which was a very treacherous expedition. He lost a lot of men, a lot of resources, and now he is squarely in enemy territory. Now, the Romans don't have full control over the Po Valley, over Cisalpine Gaul, but he's far away from home territory. He needs to secure resources to keep his army going, and that can be a very tricky thing to do. So Hannibal has just won a pretty impressive victory over Publius Scipio, but he is nowhere close to being in the clear. He's still in quite a dangerous situation, particularly considering we have Longus coming up from the south.
Right until the clash at Ticinus just a few days ago. The damage to Roman prestige raises the danger of further defections. What's worse, Gallic tribes are flocking to join Hannibal, enthused by his ability to defeat the Romans and his softer administrative touch.
And this is what I mean when I say that Rome does not have full control over the Po Valley. This is a point in Roman history. You know, we all know about Caesar and his conquest of Gaul. When we talk about Gaul in that context, it's Transalpine Gaul. Gaul over the Alps. That's what Caesar conquered. Here, we're talking about Cisalpine Gaul. Gaul on the near side of the Alps. And at this point in Roman history, the Romans have still a very loose control of this territory. There are a lot of Gallic tribes who are still willing to revolt, or at least stay neutral in the conflict. And now that Hannibal's gaining some momentum, he's suddenly receiving a massive flow of Gallic allies, who beforehand were willing to stay out of it. Of course, they're looking out for themselves, their people, their tribes, and they're going to go in whichever direction the wind blows.
Scipio has no option but to retreat, realizing he is deep in hostile territory. He marches to Placentia and makes camp across the Po River. Hannibal pursues and catches up 2 days later. Learning of his arrival, over 2,000 Gauls allied to Rome rise up in the camp and attack Roman soldiers, killing many in their sleep.
Wow.
Before sunrise, they cross the Trebia to join Hannibal, bringing with them the severed heads of slain Romans.
I mean, you know what? I'm saying Hannibal's in a tough position, and he is. Hannibal is still in a difficult position. But you know what? Scipio's in a tough position too. Territory that might have been neutral or sort of semi-controlled by Rome is now quickly turning into hostile enemy territory. I mean, defections from within, he's wounded. Scipio is also in a dangerous spot.
Using the Gallic defection as propaganda, Hannibal makes sure to spread the word that Rome's allies are joining him en masse, thereby boosting his popularity among the tribes.
Yep.
Scipio again moves south, not wanting to risk being caught in the open. A day later, he reaches the hills and sets up camp in a strong position, with hills protecting his flanks from cavalry attacks. Then he settles in and waits for reinforcements.
There we go. But this is the advantage Scipio does have, which is, even though he's in what is quickly becoming hostile territory, he is a lot closer to strongly controlled Roman territory than Hannibal is to Carthaginian territory. Not to mention, he has Longus and reinforcements moving quickly towards him. So Publius Scipio still has these things on his side.
By mid-December, the two consuls join forces. Discussing how to confront Hannibal, Scipio argues against taking the field, stressing that Longus's troops lack experience and need additional training, having been raised less than a year ago. Longus disagrees and sets up camp a few kilometers north from Scipio's position.
And this is always a good thing to look at, and this is sort of a trend we see in many battles throughout history. We have the more experienced commander who's fought a battle against the opponent and the guy just arriving. And as these situations often play out, Publius Scipio is saying, look, we should hold back, be cautious. He knows what he's up against. Longus, who still has that typical Roman confidence, he's just arrived, he's saying, not a chance, we've got this. Let's go and fight Hannibal. So that difference in opinion is very interesting and very telling, and I think also going to be dangerous for the Romans.
Just as eager to fight as Longus, Hannibal maintains his camp on the flat plain and surveys the potential battlefield west of the Trebia River. Meanwhile, he sends a raiding party to ravage the area along the river, suspecting that Gallic tribes living there, who pledged allegiance to him, are now negotiating with the Romans.
It's back and forth.
It's unclear if the Gauls intended to betray Hannibal, but with their villages now being raided, some of the tribesmen appeal to the Romans for help. Longus promptly sends 1,000 Velitus across the river to attack the raiders. With Hannibal...
And the Velitus, as we covered last time, we're talking about basically Roman light infantry.
Hannibal's troops scattered across the area and encumbered by plunder. Roman troops start picking off small groups of Carthaginians, quickly routing the raiders. Seeing this, troops on duty outside Hannibal's camp rush to the aid of the retreating raiding party. The fighting is fierce, as both sides want to prove their superiority, but the Roman Velites are soon forced into a fighting retreat.
Uh-oh.
The skirmish escalates rapidly, spreading across a large area. More and more troops from each side join in.
Oh yeah, this skirmish is certainly escalating. We went from a light skirmish between light skirmishers, the Velites, who are light skirmishers, light infantry, as we discussed. This is now quickly becoming a larger scale battle, as men from both camps, which are now relatively close, are getting dragged into the conflict.
Pockets of clashes develop as neither side is able to shore up its ranks. It becomes apparent that the chaotic skirmish might turn into a full-scale battle that neither commander will be able to control.
Yep.
Hannibal takes the initiative. He stops sending more troops into the fray, trying to avoid a battle that he did not plan and can do little to influence. He then audaciously rides out in person and rallies the scattered troops.
Wow.
He pulls them back and arrays them in a line outside the camp.
And, I mean, I'm not trying to hate on Longus too much, but that's a real leader. This is happening. It's sort of out of Hannibal's control. Not a great situation. And so what does he do? He gets out there. Hannibal takes control. He doesn't just send orders for the men to come back. He knows he needs a physical presence on the field. So he rides out there, tells everybody, get back to camp, get back in line, organize yourselves. We are not going to be fighting this battle that I didn't plan for. Smart way of thinking. You only want to fight when you're prepared. Also putting himself out there. You know, this is another good example of Hannibal's leadership. Not that we need another example. We've had many, but we're going to get many more.
The Romans advance, but Hannibal restrains his men from charging the enemy. The Romans too halt their advance, refusing to attack the well-positioned Carthaginians, who can now be supported from the camp with projectiles and fresh troops.
Yeah.
The day draws to a close. Hannibal demonstrates his shrewdness by not committing to an uncertain battle. And by restraining his troops, he exhibits what he would become so famous for: his extraordinary ability to exercise control over his army.
Exactly.
Romans retire towards their camp, satisfied at scoring a victory against Hannibal's troops, their morale and confidence partially restored.
Oh my.
Longus, who is
They do not know what they're in for.
described by sources as having an aggressive temperament, shows his eagerness to do battle as soon as possible. He won't have to wait long.
Oh no.
At dawn, Roman guards sound the alarm. The Carthaginians are attacking the camp.
Yep.
Awoken to projectiles flying over the palisades, Roman troops are ordered to get ready for battle.
And now we're getting to the Battle of the Trebia River, which we've done a reaction to before. It is a Patreon member-only reaction. You can see that in the top right corner, but, you know, we're sort of getting, entered right into the middle of Hannibal's plans. Remember what we saw the day before. Hannibal made sure to remove his men from a situation he didn't have control over. If the Carthaginians are launching this raid on the Roman camp, you know Hannibal has something planned, and we're going to see that play out throughout this battle.
On empty stomachs, the men rush to form up in front of their tents in frigid conditions. Longus sends all 4,000 of his cavalry against the Numidians, closely followed by 6,000 Velites. But the Numidians soon break off.
Hannibal using his far superior Numidian cavalry. If you want a cavalry who can skirmish, maneuver, retreat when they need to, the Numidians are extraordinarily skilled at that. And I think Hannibal's already reading Longus. Part of the reason why he's going with this plan is because he knows how Longus is going to respond.
As the fighting moves north, the fast cavalrymen engage in hit-and-run attacks. Longus marches out with the rest of his army to meet the enemy.
Yep.
Heavy infantry forms into 3 columns, each
the rest of his army, underline
3.5 kilometers long. They lag behind the cavalry and Velitus, but make steady progress. Numidians continue to avoid a direct confrontation with the Roman cavalry and Velitus.
And, I mean, you know, I already know what's happening. We've done a reaction to this. But even if you don't, just look at what is going on. Hannibal has sent his cavalry to go raid the Roman camp. And now they are retreating continually and skillfully as Longus sends his entire army out to chase them. Doesn't it just feel like Longus is being pulled by Hannibal into a position that's more favorable to the Carthaginians? I mean, we can just see it playing out in front of us. Now, to be fair, we're doing some armchair generalship. It's a lot easier to see these things when we're looking at it on a map than if you're actually there involved in the battle as Longus is. So, you know, we can judge Longus's performance after the battle, and we can be fair to him, but you're kind of already getting an idea of what's going on here.
Meanwhile, Hannibal gathers his officers to lay out his plans. He offers words of encouragement and orders them to ready the men for battle. Well rested and well fed, Carthaginian troops take to the field. To the east, the skirmish continues. Numidians find themselves backed against the Trebia. They start crossing the river as they continue to pull back, pursued by the Romans. Arriving with the infantry and
to my understanding, this is a fairly shallow river, so we're not necessarily talking about some intense fjording of the river. It should be relatively easy to cross, though it's still a river that is probably damn cold at this point.
Eager for battle, Longus orders the army to deploy on the western bank. The 3 columns begin crossing, chest deep in the freezing water.
Okay, well, that's actually deeper than I thought. Chest deep. So they're able to fjord it on foot, but they're relatively deep in this river. Also, Hannibal has his troops aligned on the west bank of the river. He's ready, and Longus's men are currently, well, some of them are on the other side of the bank, being drawn towards Hannibal's lines, and the rest of them are currently traipsing through a freezing cold river. It is very clear who has control of the battlefield here.
Meanwhile, Hannibal sends 8,000 infantry forward to support the Numidian retreat and to provide a screen for his own deployment. He then moves his main line about 1 kilometer towards the approaching Romans. Across the field, Longus's army takes several hours to deploy. After fording the cold Trebia, his men are hungry, soaked, and standing in the near freezing temperature.
Uh-oh.
The Roman consul places his Velitus in the front, forms his veteran infantry in the center, with Gallic and allied infantry on either side, and cavalry on the flanks. Hannibal deploys his infantry in a thin line. Gallic allies in the center, with Spanish and...
So we can see the composition of these armies here. The Romans with 36,000 infantry, 4,000 cavalry. The Carthaginians with a different composition, 20,000 infantry and 10,000 cavalry. This makes a lot of sense. We've talked about before, the Romans were far more heavy on infantry than cavalry. They often struggled with cavalry. As you can see here, they're using Gallic cavalry. Versus the Carthaginians, they were far more into their cavalry, and they had some very skilled cavalrymen. The Iberian cavalry were skilled, and they had the Numidian cavalry, some of, if not the best in the world. We can see the Roman line, the legionaries in the middle. This is the core of the Roman army. These are heavy infantrymen who are some of the best in the world. I mean, they're quite well disciplined, well trained. The legionaries are good at holding their line and pushing back. But on either side of them, you have allied infantry, probably not up to the same standards as the Roman legionaries. So all things to think about when we're looking at this battle. And now we get to the breakdown of Hannibal's army.
Libyan infantry on either side. Elephants flank the infantry, while the Numidian and Gallic cavalry is further wide.
Gauls in the middle, flanked by Libyans and Iberians. The Libyans and Iberians would be the more core Carthaginian forces. Of course, Hannibal is he wasn't born, but, he grew up in Iberia. That's basically his home. And so I imagine the Iberians and the Libyans, who are, of course, from Carthaginian territory, are probably his hardiest, most loyal troops, and then some of his new Gallic allies in the middle. Interesting, the army is set up sort of the opposite way of the Romans. The Romans strong in the middle, maybe a little weaker on the flanks, versus the Carthaginians stronger on the flanks and a little weaker in the middle.
Around noon, Longus orders his entire line to advance, confident in the clear numerical advantage of his heavy infantry.
Yeah.
The Romans advance in good order. The flat plain, free of any obstacles, seems an ideal battleground for their style of warfare.
It does seem that way.
Meanwhile, Hannibal holds the line, letting the enemy come to him.
Yep.
Skirmishers get into range and begin exchanging projectiles. With Balearic slingers in their ranks, combining with javelin men, the Carthaginians quickly gain the upper hand against the Roman velitus, who used up many of their javelins while pursuing the Numidian cavalry earlier in the day. Skirmishers from both sides withdraw through the gaps as the main lines of infantry close in.
Alright, so right until the two sides clash, you can see Hannibal's clearly had control. He's drawn the Romans to him. He's stayed where he is. But we can already see he has a plan in mind. But plans don't always survive contact with the enemy. In fact, the quote is, "No plan survives contact with the enemy," right? It's not an absolute thing. I think some plans do. But this very well could go badly for Hannibal. I mean, he's been behaving cautiously and intelligently. He's clearly got something in mind, but if the Romans completely overwhelm the entire Carthaginian army, everything could fall apart right now. I guess we'll see what's going to happen. I'm just saying, nothing is guaranteed. It's not guaranteed that this is going to go one way or the other. We'll have to see what happens.
The heavier, more compact Roman infantry pushes the Carthaginian line back, causing heavy casualties to Hannibal's Gallic infantry in the center.
Yes, in the center specifically. And you can already see that the Roman legionaries in the center are pushing Hannibal's Gallic infantry back. The flanks, Hannibal's flanks are also being pushed back, but they're a little more steady, versus his center is being caved in by the Roman legionaries. That's going to be important.
On the flanks, Hannibal orders his cavalry to push forward. Some of the Roman horses become frightened by Hannibal's elephants, causing disruption within the ranks. But groups of Roman velitus, specially trained to deal with elephants, mix with the cavalry and attack the terrifying beasts,
Nice.
wounding and killing many.
Nice.
Eventually, the Numidians manage to overwhelm and advance against the Roman cavalry. But despite Roman flanks being pushed back, the Carthaginian center is crumbling. Veteran legionnaires are hacking through the Gallic infantry. Without any reinforcements available, it seems that Hannibal cannot stop the onslaught.
It does seem that way. This could be very bad for Hannibal. His center is being pushed in. It might be about to completely crumble, in which case he's done for. But come on, seeing what we've seen up until this point, clearly Hannibal has thought all this through. He's planned for this. Do you really think he doesn't have something in mind?
But what the Romans don't know is that while surveying the field on the eve of battle, Hannibal personally picked 2,000 elite troops and positioned them in a dry riverbed, hidden from view.
Surprise!
Now, they emerge from the ravine with perfect timing, just as the Numidians finally rout the Roman cavalry, poised to encircle the enemy.
Yep. I mean, and those 2,000 extra troops are great, but That's not even mentioning the fact that the Numidians had already pushed Rome's cavalry back, and they were about to turn around and turn on the Roman infantry in the first place. Now they've got 2,000 troops to back them up.
Hard pressed from the front by elephants, Carthaginian infantry and skirmishers, the wings of the Roman infantry buckle as the Numidians attack their rear.
Yep.
Meanwhile, Hannibal's center collapses as the veteran Roman heavy infantry cuts right through the Carthaginian line.
I mean, this is just an absolute masterclass in strategy. Now you can see here, Hannibal's center is literally collapsing. His Gallic infantry stood no chance against the Roman legionaries. Hannibal knows this. Roman legionaries are extremely well disciplined, well skilled, prepared to fight this kind of combat. Now, in another battle against another Carthaginian commander, this could have been extremely bad. The Carthaginians could have been in trouble. But Hannibal recognized this weakness of his and the strength of the Romans and decided to work around it. And you can also imagine the legionaries they're right in the middle of this melee. They're hacking and slashing, fighting their way forward. They are not too aware of what's going on the flanks. So this is a perfect way to basically surround them. Flank the Romans, come in from behind. And now this Roman strength of being able to cave in Hannibal's center and almost crumble it entirely is being turned into a massive weakness.
Still unaffected by the encirclement thanks to their discipline and organization. However, realizing the battle is lost, the legionnaires retreat back across the river to Placentia, maintaining their battle formation.
But, of course, these are still Roman legionaries. Disciplined. They can perform a disciplined, orderly retreat. Doesn't change the fact that this is a massive loss for the Romans.
Roman casualties are heavy, likely around 28,000 dead or wounded.
Oh my god!
While the
And what did they begin with? Was it 36,000 infantry? I believe it was something around that. 28,000 casualties. And Carthage,
losses are much lower, between 3,000 and 5,000.
way lower.
Losing most of his elephants, possibly all but one, is the only major loss for Hannibal at Trebia.
Yeah.
In just a matter of weeks, Hannibal outperformed both Roman consuls with...
Yes. I mean, we saw him outperform Publius Scipio, though that battle was smaller in scale than this one. This one was much larger in scale. It was far more of a full set-piece engagement against Longus, and Hannibal just completely outclassed his opponent. I mean, I think this battle is just an extremely impressive performance from Hannibal. I love seeing how it plays out, and I like how they sort of showed it from the Roman perspective here, because, you might think, well, maybe the Romans have this, they're pushing Hannibal's center in, but judging from our perspective, we can sort of see that something's going on. Hannibal has planned this all out. He's brought the Romans to him. He's standing his ground. Even when it looks like he might be at a disadvantage, he's got something in mind. So just extremely well-executed strategy from Hannibal here.
Superior planning, near-perfect coordination, and control of his troops.
Honestly, the planning is impressive enough. There's a lot of impressive things about this. The planning's impressive. Hannibal's ability to read his opponent. Clearly, he'd gotten a read on Longus. He knew exactly what he was going to do. But really, the most impressive part of this is the execution. Imagine how well coordinated you have to be, right? The Numidian cavalry have to be well coordinated. They have to be in coordination with your infantry. Now, I think you can rely on them. Your 2,000 troops hiding in the trees, hiding in that dry riverbed, you have to have incredible coordination. They have to know when to leap onto the field and start to flank the Romans. Most importantly, your infantry, particularly your infantry in the center, needs to stand strong, fall back, but not completely crumble. This is an incredible feat of coordination from Hannibal and his men. Really well executed.
News of the defeat rocks the Roman Senate and causes widespread panic among the population. The damage to Roman prestige persuades many more Gauls to join Hannibal.
Yep.
Additional attacks on Roman outposts and towns cause further disruption, before cold weather finally forces armies of both sides into winter quarters. But as Hannibal's devastating campaign in Italy gains momentum, a seemingly minor event in Iberia could threaten the Carthaginian war effort in the long run.
This is true. All right. And that is the end of part 4. Ended on a bit of a cliffhanger there. But that is absolutely true. Wherever Hannibal is, the Carthaginians are usually winning, but you cannot guarantee Carthaginian victory wherever Hannibal isn't. That's the problem here. I really enjoyed this one. Battle of the Trebia, Battle of the Trebia River. I thought this episode was really fantastic. A real masterclass from Hannibal. I think this is one of his more well-known battles. Of course, we're getting... in a bit, a couple parts maybe, his most well-known battle, Cannae, but Trebia is also pretty well-known, studied, a very impressive performance. And we can already see a lot of the hallmarks of Hannibal's strategy that we're going to see again and again throughout this entire series. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I hope you guys did. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you would leave a like, subscribe, check out the Patreon and channel memberships, both of which are linked in the description. Anyway, I hope you guys are having a good day today, and I will see you all again next time. Goodbye.